mentioned during this hour once that she's under an investigation for an inappropriate relationship with a staffer at the Labor Department. She's married, and her husband is now banned from entering the premises at the Labor Department because he is now under investigation for sexual harassment of at least 2 people inside the building. And that, Jen, as you know, makes him the first spouse of a cabinet member in history to be banned from any building in Washington. But that's the Trump crowd.
What an honor. I mean, I may have to adjust tonight my rank order of the most problematic cabinet members because I think they're moving up. And there's a lot of competition for that award.
Well, she's very happy that Howard Lutnick has gotten some attention lately because that has helped divert some of our attention from her. But we'll get to the Labor Department one of these nights. We will. She's
probably hoping Pam Bondi testifies again next week too.
Yeah,
you know,
that would help her too. That would. Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Thank you. Well, the tourist attraction that calls itself the British royal family has a problem tonight that it has not had since 1647. The family in whose name crimes against humanity and freedom have been committed around the world for centuries suffered its first arrest in 379 years today. The little brother character called Andrew, who now goes by an invented last name, was arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office. It is a crime taken so seriously in British common law, where it has mostly rested quietly for hundreds of years, that the crime carries a maximum penalty of death, as so many crimes did centuries ago when British common law was taking formation. It was an announcement that no one wanted to make, and so it fell to Assistant Chief Constable Oliver Wright to tell the world today in writing, quote, "Following a thorough assessment, we have now opened an investigation into this allegation of misconduct in public office." The investigation was begun at the urging of an anti-monarchy group led by Graham Smith, who first notified authorities that they found evidence in the Epstein files that could indicate Andrew was passing British government secrets to his friend, the sex trafficker and child rapist Jeffrey Epstein. Julie K. Brown is the investigative reporter at the Miami Herald who illuminated the crimes of Jeffrey Epstein more fully than anyone else in the American news media. She wrote this today after Andrew's arrest. His arrest comes just 4 days after the Daily Mail reported that he passed on sensitive information about the taxpayer-owned Royal Bank of Scotland to Epstein when he was representing the UK as a trade envoy. Documents released by the U.S. Department of Justice as part of the Epstein Files Transparency Act revealed that Andrew leaked details he learned from meeting with bank executives in the wake of a $45 billion bailout. Andrew also allegedly passed on other sensitive information he learned to a banker friend, according to the Telegraph. Interestingly, Andrew's arrest is not concerning the 2011 sexual assault allegations that were brought against him by Virginia Giuffre, but it was recent stories in the British media about him passing on financial information to what the British press called his pedo mate. Andrew has denied any wrongdoing in connection with Jeffrey Epstein, but no one in Britain seems to believe that. Andrew's older brother set a very, very low bar throughout his life for Andrew's behavior to be judged better than his older brother Charles, who, while married to his first wife, was heard in a telephone call that was made public to the world, imagining himself to be a tampon for his then girlfriend, who is now his current wife. Such is the disgrace of Charles. But today, Charles has the assurance of history that his younger brother has out-disgraced him by a wide margin now. Charles said the right thing today, the thing that Donald Trump would never say and did not say when given an opportunity today. Charles issued a statement saying, quote, "I have learned with the deepest concern the news about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and suspicion of misconduct in public office. What now follows is the full, fair, and proper process by which this issue is investigated in the appropriate manner and by the appropriate authorities. In this, as I have said before, they have our full and wholehearted support and cooperation. Let me state clearly, the law must take its course. As this process continues, it would not be right for me to comment further on this matter. Notice the contrast between what Charles said about his brother and what Donald Trump said.
I think it's a shame. I think it's very sad. I think it's so bad for the royal family. It's a very, very sad. To me, it's a very sad thing. When I see that, it's a very sad thing to see it and to see what's going on with his brother, who's obviously coming to our country very soon, and he's a fantastic man, the king. So I think it's a very sad thing. It's really interesting because nobody used to speak about Epstein when he was alive.
A very sad thing. He thinks it's very sad. The guy's brother didn't express sympathy for his brother. Charles didn't say, I think it's very sad. Donald Trump said, to me, it's a very sad thing. So Andrew getting arrested is a very sad thing to Donald Trump. And Donald Trump did not say the law must take its course. Donald Trump has never said it's a very sad thing after listening to any of the victims and survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking and rape. Donald Trump has never expressed a single word of sympathy for any one of them. But arresting a friend of Jeffrey Epstein, Donald Trump, who was Jeffrey Epstein's best friend for 10 years, thinks is very, very sad. Virginia Giuffre was 16 years old when Donald Trump's old friend, Ghislaine Maxwell, found her working in the spa at Donald Trump's Florida club. Ghislaine Maxwell brought Virginia Giuffre to Jeffrey Epstein's house in Florida. Previously on this program, I have read Virginia Giuffre's account of what happened there and how Jeffrey Epstein had sex with her the day he met her, in the presence and with the help of convicted sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell. Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein sex trafficked Virginia Giuffre to Andrew in London. Virginia Giuffre was a victim of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. And then for some years, she was a survivor. And last year, she could survive no more and took her own life. In her memoir, which was published shortly after she died, titled Nobody's Girl, a memoir of surviving abuse and fighting for justice, she described her first encounter with Andrew in London in detail. She said it was, quote, as if he believed having sex with me was his birthright. She said the sexual encounter was rushed. And then, quote, afterward, he said, thank you, in his clipped British accent. In my memory, the whole thing lasted less than half an hour. The next morning, it was clear that Maxwell had conferred with her royal chum because she told me, you did well. The prince had fun. Epstein would give me $15,000 for servicing the man the tabloids called Randy Andy. Today, Virginia Giuffre's family issued this statement. At last today, our broken hearts have been lifted at the news that no one is above the law, not even royalty. On behalf of our sister, Virginia Roberts Giuffre, we extend our gratitude to the UK's Thames Valley Police for their investigation and arrest of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. He was never a prince. For survivors everywhere, Virginia did this for you. In a 2009 television interview in which Andrew desperately tried and failed to get control of the story of his friendship and possible sex trafficking with Jeffrey Epstein, Andrew denied what was already Virginia Giuffre's public accusation about being trafficked to him. No one else was convinced by that interview. No one believed Andrew. And that interview forced his family to begin the process of cutting ties with him. That's how much they didn't believe him. In the same interview, Andrew was asked why he continued his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, who was the richest person in Ohio, had the same pedomate for decades. And that is how Jeffrey Epstein got so rich. Ohio billionaire Leslie Wexner, who owned thousands of retail clothing stores, said yesterday in a deposition for the House Oversight Committee that he was duped by Jeffrey Epstein. And he actually tried to deny under oath that he was a friend of Jeffrey Epstein. He resisted the word friend under oath. And then this happened.
You said a few times throughout this deposition today that you did not consider Mr. Epstein a friend of yours. However, you signed this letter, and I quote, "Your friend Leslie." Why would you sign "your friend Leslie" to someone you did not consider to be a friend of yours?
I don't know.
For a member of the British royal family, you can't get away with answers like that in interviews. But if you are an American billionaire, if you are the richest person in Ohio, that works for you. You'll still be the richest person in Ohio after you say that, after you're seen testifying that way on video. No price to pay. If any member of the British cabinet lied about a friendship with Jeffrey Epstein the way Donald Trump's lying Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick did, that person would be immediately removed from office in Britain and banished in disgrace, as other British politicians have already experienced because of their association with Jeffrey Epstein. Today, Julie K. Brown wrote, "It's astonishing how much accountability seems to be possible once you cross the Atlantic." In her book, Virginia Giuffre wrote about the moment she met Andrew. She wrote, "When Prince Andrew arrived at the house that evening, Maxwell was more coquettish than usual. 'Guess Jenna's age,' she urged the prince after she introduced me. The Duke of York, who was then 41, guessed correctly. 17. 'My daughters are just a little younger than you,' he told me, explaining his accuracy. As usual, Maxwell was quick with a joke. 'I guess we will have to trade her in soon.'" The lives of the people in that scene have changed dramatically. Ghislaine Maxwell is serving a 20-year sentence for sex trafficking, hoping for a pardon from Donald Trump, who has said this about his old friend Ghislaine Maxwell: "I just wish her well." And now Andrew has been arrested. And Virginia Giuffre continues to testify against him from the grave. Leading off our discussion tonight is Congressman Robert Garcia of California. He's the top Democrat on the House Oversight Committee. It was in that deposition in Ohio yesterday. Congressman Garcia, you had no idea, as you were conducting that deposition yesterday, that Andrew would be the breaking news today, an actual arrest for someone, apparently because of involvement with Jeffrey Epstein.
That's absolutely right. Look, I think that first, it's been pretty stunning to see what's happened today, and it is good to see action being taken in the UK. The former prince has to be held accountable. I'm glad there was an arrest. I'm glad the people of the UK have been up in arms. There have been real consequences. And of course, that leads us here in the US to think, when is that going to happen here in our own country? When will we begin to hold these powerful men accountable? And what's been stunning about today is I have actually heard directly from survivors who have begun to see some hope. They feel like things are finally beginning to happen, and they're hopeful that that can also happen here in the United States. We have to have accountability. This cover-up, which is clearly being directed by the DOJ and the president, has to end. The files fully have to be released. And all those powerful men, like the former prince, need to be held accountable for the horrific crimes, trafficking, rape of children that they've all been involved with.
We saw him in that interview in 2019 saying, thinking he could get away with saying at that time that he did not regret his involvement with Jeffrey Epstein. You have Howard Lutnick in Donald Trump's cabinet not regretting that he lied about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein just a couple of months ago in an interview.
It's exactly right. And what's been horrific about that is it's folks like Howard Lutnick, it's people around the president, it's he himself who's called this whole thing a hoax. What is going on at the White House and the DOJ? Why is Pam Bondi obsessed with covering up the crimes of billionaires? Why are we not getting access to the full files? And back to Lutnick, we should be really clear. He said in that interview that he essentially cut off ties with Epstein. Not only did he continue to have a relationship, he goes on to his island. His wife communicates with him. He goes into business with him. He actually has an active friendship and relationship with someone that had already been convicted of sex trafficking of minors. And yet he's right now still in our government. Where's the accountability for Howard Lutnick? Where's the continued accountability for Alex Acosta? Why aren't we going after the people that have committed the crimes here in the U.S.? And that's what I think our country right now, both Republicans and Democrats, are asking themselves.
Has the British government in any way communicated with the committee for any assistance in their investigation?
So we have had some communication. We've also been we have sent some letters to the former prince and his representatives, and quite frankly, we're hoping to hear back. Look, we've gotten some response from them, which we are working through right now. But what I can say is this: the former prince should be held accountable for the horrific things he's done, and at the same time, he has important information. So I hope that as the former prince deals with the horrors of his actions and the damage and the terror that he has caused, he thinks about how he can begin to bring justice for the survivors in the future. And the reality is that he has critical investigation for us and the Oversight Committee to assess. And so we want to talk to the former prince. We want to understand who else was in those rooms, who else participated in those horrors. How did Jeffrey Epstein gain access to so many powerful people? What foreign governments were involved, if any, in the financing of Epstein? And so, look, not just the former prince, but a lot of powerful people have information that is critical to our investigation.
Carson Garcia, we want to continue this conversation, but I have to squeeze in a commercial break. I want to ask you about that deposition yesterday. Today, the House Oversight Committee released video of yesterday's deposition with billionaire Leslie Wexner, the man who made Jeffrey Epstein rich enough to run an international sex trafficking conspiracy. Under oath, Leslie Wexner told the committee he had no idea that his friend was an international sex trafficking pedophile.
I think the perspective that I have now, and I think it's really important for this group to understand, is that as I look back at it, I was conned by the world Olympic all-time con artist. And and you look at, I read in the news all the people he knew, royalty, kings, princes, and all that. An incredible con artist.
Leslie Wexner opened a store in Ohio in 1963 that quickly became successful, and he built that business into a worldwide empire of thousands of retail clothing stores that made him one of the richest people selling clothing on this planet.
Do you think Mr. Epstein thought you two to be friends?
Objection. I don't know what he thought.
Leslie Wexner says that he handed over his entire fortune to Jeffrey Epstein's control. He gave Jeffrey Epstein the power of attorney to sign checks, to sell assets that belonged to Leslie Wexner, to do anything Jeffrey Epstein wanted to do with Leslie Wexner's money. But now Leslie Wexner says he didn't think they were friends, even though he contributed the second creepiest entry in Jeffrey Epstein's 50th birthday book, outdone only by the one with Donald Trump's signature on it, which includes a drawing of a naked woman and the line, "May every day be another wonderful secret." The man who had trouble calling Jeffrey Epstein a friend under oath yesterday admitted giving to Jeffrey Epstein this birthday card signed, "Your friend, Leslie."
Did you yourself write this letter to Mr. Epstein?
Sadly, I did.
Did Ms. Maxwell approach you to write this letter for Mr. Epstein's birthday?
I think the request was to write a card or a note or something for a birthday book.
And did that come from Ms. Maxwell?
I don't remember.
Mr. Wexner, would you please read the main body of the birthday note for the record, please?
I wanted to get you what you want. So here it is. Happy birthday, your friend Leslie.
And what was your understanding of what Mr. Epstein would want?
He was a bachelor, so I drew a pair of boobs. As a kind of a joke and offhandedly, I'd say.
Understand.
I hope you do.
You've said a few times throughout this deposition today that you did not consider Mr. Epstein a friend of yours. However, you signed this letter, and I quote, "Your friend Leslie." Why would you sign "your friend Leslie" to someone you did not consider to be a friend of yours?
I don't know.
Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett asked Leslie Wexner about Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump.
Did you ever spend time with Epstein and Donald Trump?
Together?
Yes.
I want to answer this question accurately. I would go to some of the Victoria's Secret fashion shows because it's very important to the brand. At some of the fashion shows, Jeffrey was there and some Trump was there. And I remembered because Trump would always introduce himself to me. And I always thought it was kind of odd that he was at the fashion show because he had nothing to do with fashion.
Back with us, Congressman Robert Garcia, top Democrat in the House Oversight Committee, present at that deposition yesterday. What was your assessment of his testimony?
I mean, look, Wexner is just not credible, and he wasn't credible during his testimony. I think it is so outrageous, and I'm not sure if Wexner thinks he can just pull a fast one on the committee and the American public. But to say that he was not friendly or not a friend of Epstein's is such a blatant lie. Let's be really clear. I mean, Wexner gave Epstein hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of his own fortune. Wexner gave Epstein the co-presidency of the community he founded in Ohio. He provided him the power over his entire estate. He gave him payments to then pay gynecologists for God knows what. They were friendly. He went to the island. He went to his properties. He wrote him birthday notes. They talked on the phone. They saw each other at events, but they were not friends? Let's be really clear here. Wexner is the reason that there's a Epstein Island, that there's an Epstein plane, that there was enough fortunes and wealth to abuse and rape and terrorize women and children across this country and around the world. That is in large part because of Wexner's fortune. And Wexner has the audacity to sit there and tell us that he wasn't friends with Jeffrey Epstein. It's outrageous. It's unconscionable. And I think that the American public should be as furious as we are at seeing what's happening right now in this country. We are seeing the most powerful billionaires, the most powerful people try to cover up this enormous, horrific sex trafficking ring, probably the largest in the modern era. And the abuse of these women and these children, they deserve justice. And Mr. Wexner is an enormous part of why this harm happened to so many people.
People who've studied this have said there could be no Jeffrey Epstein sex trafficking conspiracy worldwide ring without Wexner's money.
It's exactly right. It's just not possible. And you have to think also that Wexner gave essentially the power of his entire estate to Epstein. Epstein was cutting checks and making investments and going into business and doing all sorts of favors for Wexner. We've got to end this cover-up now.
Congressman Robert Garcia, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Thank you. And coming up, it's murder. That's what a new federal lawsuit says about Donald Trump's missile attacks off the coast of South America that have now killed 145. This does not have the unlimited right to murder people at sea the way Donald Trump seems to think that he does. Donald Trump has killed at least 145 people with missile strikes on small boats, outboard motor boats off the shores of South America. The latest strike was on Monday in a series of attacks on 3 small boats in which Donald Trump killed 11 people. Donald Trump claims, without any evidence at all, that all of the people he has killed in those small boats were smuggling drugs on those boats. There is no evidence of that. None. And now the families of 26-year-old Chad Joseph and 41-year-old Rishi Samaru, 2 Trinidadian men killed in a missile strike in October, are now suing the United States government for wrongful death. The lawsuit says that the 2 men, quote, were not members of or affiliated with drug cartels. The Trinidadian government has publicly stated that the government has no information linking Joseph or Samaru to illegal activities, and that it had no information of the victims of U.S. strikes being in possession of illegal guns, drugs, or small arms. These premeditated and intentional killings lack any plausible legal justification. Thus, they were simply murders ordered by individuals at the highest levels of government and obeyed by military officers in the chain of command. Joining us now is Jeffrey Stein, one of the attorneys who filed that lawsuit. Jeffrey Stein, thank you very much for joining us tonight, and thank you very much for filing this lawsuit, which supports everything I have been saying about what's been happening in these attacks. What I did not know and what I learned in your filing is that admiralty law gives you a unique posture here in court that would not be available to you if this same thing was happening on land.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So our lawsuit makes clear that the U.S. government should be held responsible for Chad and Rishi's, heinous killings under a couple of federal statutes. One is called the Death on the High Seas Act, which is a 1920 law, which, as the name suggests, gives family members of individuals who were killed on the high seas, as were Chad and Rishi, a right to, come into court and demand redress for those wrongful deaths. Second federal statute that we cite is a very old law from 1789. It's called the Alien Tort Statute, and that law gives non-citizens the ability to sue in U.S. court for violations of international law. In this case, the international law violation is the U.S. government's arbitrary and unlawful deprivation of the right to life, which is also known as an extrajudicial killing. This is a right that is, codified in every major human rights treaty, and it unequivocally binds the United States. And as you were mentioning, there's a third federal statute called the Suits in Admiralty Act, which makes clear that for civil actions, like this one, which concern conduct that falls within the federal court's admiralty jurisdiction, that statute waives the federal government's sovereign immunity. So that makes clear that the U.S. government, not only can, but must be held responsible for these, really grotesque killings.
Our audience has been following very clearly what's been happening in Minneapolis and those killings by federal agents in Minneapolis and the legal challenges involved in trying to bring this kind of lawsuit there because of immunity provisions that do exist in certain ways for federal agents in that kind of activity. But what you have found through admiralty law and these statutes that you're citing is that you have found a way that it's not that it gets around it. It's that kind of immunity has never been present when you're on the high seas.
Yeah, that's right. Since 1920, when the Suits and Admiralty Act was enacted by Congress, the statute has been very clear that the United States government can be held liable for this sort of wrongful act, and courts have been very clear, for over a century now that homicide, murder, the wrongful act that's at issue in this case, is precisely the sort of conduct that falls within the Death on the High Seas Act, and for which the Suits and Admiralty Act waives the U.S. government's sovereign immunity. So we think that there's a very clear case that the U.S. government should be held accountable here. And we hope that the lawsuit, not only makes this very strong legal case, but sets out the moral stakes and the human stakes of these really heinous crimes against humanity. I think the lawsuit makes clear that people like Chad and Rishi, they aren't pawns in the Trump administration's grotesque politics of spectacle, which have also been on display in Minneapolis. They were sons and fathers, really cherished members of two close-knit families. Their deaths are tragedies of immense proportions, and their families deserve justice from the courts of the country that killed them in cold blood.
Jeffrey Stein, please rejoin us as discovery proceeds in this case and you get information from the government that they have been refusing to release to Congress or anyone else. Jeffrey Stein, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
And coming up today, Donald Trump bragged about meeting a man who, according to Donald Trump, wanted to kiss him violently. That's how Donald Trump described it. That's next. Something that never happened in American history until Donald Trump got his cabinet appointees confirmed by the Republican United States Senate. The New York Times is reporting tonight the husband of Labor Secretary Lori Chavez de Remer has been barred from the department's headquarters after at least 2 female staff members told officials that he had sexually assaulted them, according to people familiar with the decision and a police report obtained by the New York Times. That report has now been confirmed by MS Now. No spouse of a cabinet member in history has ever been barred from any building in Washington or anywhere else. Donald Trump had to bring that to Washington. Today, Donald Trump managed to get through a visit of a factory without being called a pedophile protector for once. Instead of being called a pedophile protector, Donald Trump says a man at the factory, these are his words, wanted to kiss him violently.
Now I'd like to ask the president of Coosa Steel, Andrew Seville, very nice name, to come up and say a few words. I'd like to say, because I'm telling you, I met this guy, and he said something that his wife is going to be extremely upset. I said, "How are you doing?" He said, "President, if I didn't have all these cameras running, I would grab you and start kissing you violently." And I said, "Why is that?" He said, "Because what you've done for us economically in this state, in this town, with the tariffs in particular."
Well, the cameras weren't on them the whole time, so who knows how much kissing went on. On economic policy, Donald Trump tried to remind everyone in the audience about how they were all bankrupt before he started his illegal and unconstitutional tariffs.
Without tariffs, what would you do? You know what? Everybody would be bankrupt, everybody. The whole country would be bankrupt.
Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Brendan Boyle of Pennsylvania. He's the top Democrat in the House Budget Committee and a member of the all-powerful House Ways and Means Committee. Boy, that bankruptcy period was really awful during the Biden presidency when, as I recall, the economy was soaring.
And in fact, we now know, because the final data has come out regarding 2025 job creation, more jobs were created in the average month during Joe Biden's presidency than the entire last year under Donald Trump's.
And, what I foolishly thought is when Trump gets inaugurated, he's going to do absolutely nothing because Joe Biden is handing him the economy that you dream about as president. If you just do nothing, it's going to go great.
I thought exactly the same thing. In fact, I complained to a friend, Trump is the luckiest SOB.
Inheriting this economy.
He's just going to sit on his rear end, watch Fox News all day, and he will get the credit for an economy in which inflation is easing and economic growth is advancing. But what did Trump do? He screwed it up. He decided to pursue this insane tariff policy, which we now know, according to Yale Budget Lab, has added an extra $1,750 worth of costs a year in the price of goods. And that's the reason why inflation is higher today than it otherwise would be. And
that's in addition to what he's done in health care. When the Republicans in Congress all vote to take health care away from 20 million people, they have increased exponentially the cost of life in every way for those people.
And the bulk of those health care cuts haven't actually taken effect yet. The overwhelming majority of them will be phased in beginning, most cynically, this December, a month after the midterm elections, when the Medicaid cuts come. That's where most of the $1 trillion worth of health care cuts are buried.
Donald Trump said one of those things today where I don't know exactly what it actually means. He said, I won affordability. Have you heard anyone in Pennsylvania tell you that?
No, but I know who's losing affordability, and that is the people of Pennsylvania and the people throughout the United States. The reality is Donald Trump won my state, unfortunately, by just over a percentage point, won the national popular vote by just over 1 percentage point. And the single biggest reason why was the affordability or lack of affordability issue. Donald Trump promised that, quote, on day one, he would lower prices. As we sit here tonight, prices are higher today than at any point in our lifetime, and it's because of Donald Trump's policies.
We have overwhelming polling numbers here that we don't even have time to recite them all about disapproval of Donald Trump's handling of the economy, disapproval of the tariffs, disapproval of what he's done on cost of living, right across the board.
It's pretty remarkable. I thought that there was a certain bottom under which Donald Trump would never fall, right around the 38 to 40% range. He has now broken through that bottom, which interestingly never happened in the first term that he was president. In fact, his strongest numbers when he was president the first time was on the economy. Now they're among his weakest numbers.
As we go forward, we are in a government shutdown that's kind of easy to forget about in some ways because it's only one department, the Homeland Security Department. What are you anticipating there?
Yeah, depending on which measure you use, anywhere from 6 to 10% of the government is unfunded right now and in a shutdown. I have to say, I'm not optimistic that this is going to be resolved anytime soon. We are not seeing this White House in any way move in a direction that would reach a compromise.
Congressman Brendan Boyle, thank you very much for joining us tonight.